The dust settled around the old pickup truck as it rumbled to a stop in front of the weathered ranch house. Elena Martinez stepped out hesitantly, her city clothes looking absurdly out of place against the vast Montana landscape. She clutched her small suitcase, her heart pounding with uncertainty and fear. This wasn't how she'd imagined her life would turn out. Just 3 months ago, she'd been working double shifts at a diner in Phoenix, sending money back to her family in Mexico. Then she'd met Daniel Callahan online, a kind-voiced man who seemed genuinely interested in her dreams and struggles. Their conversations had grown deeper, more meaningful. When he proposed marriage, offering her a chance at legal status and a better life, she'd accepted, knowing it was transactional but hoping for dignity. Now Daniel was gone, killed in a ranching accident just 2 weeks before she arrived in America. The lawyer had called her, explaining that Daniel's father, James Callahan, had insisted she come anyway. The old cowboy wanted to honor his son's wishes, even in death. Elena's fingers trembled as she walked toward the house. Through the window, she could see movement, a tall, broad-shouldered figure moving with the careful deliberation of someone who'd spent decades working the land. The door opened before she could knock. James Callahan stood before her, a man in his late 60s with silver hair, weathered skin, and eyes the color of a stormy sky. He wore dusty jeans, boots, and a flannel shirt rolled up to his elbows. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. "Mr. Callahan," Elena began, her English careful and accented. "I know this is strange. Wrong, maybe. Daniel, he was your son, and I never even meet him in person." She swallowed hard, fighting tears. "If you want, you can send me back. I understand. I have no right to be here." She expected anger, resentment, or at worst, cold dismissal. Instead, James's stern expression softened slightly. He looked at her with something that might have been curiosity mixed with sorrow. "My son chose you," he said simply, his voice like gravel and honey. "That's enough for me. Come inside." Elena followed him into the house, her eyes taking in the rustic interior, wooden beams, worn leather furniture, and photographs covering every surface. Most were of a young man with his father's strong jaw and kind eyes. Daniel. The man she'd agreed to marry but would never know. James gestured toward the kitchen table. "Sit. You must be tired and hungry." As he moved to the stove where something was simmering, Elena noticed the slight limp in his step, the way he favored his left side. She also noticed how spotlessly clean everything was, despite the house's age. This was a man who took care of what was his. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why you let me come? You don't know me. I could be anyone." James turned, ladle in hand. "Daniel talked about you for months. He showed me your messages, your pictures. He said you were brave, honest, and hardworking. He said you reminded him of his mother. She passed 10 years ago." He paused, emotion flickering across his weathered face. "My boy didn't make decisions lightly. If he thought you belonged here, then you do." Elena felt tears spill down her cheeks. She'd expected coldness, perhaps even exploitation, a man who'd make her work without wages, hold her immigration status over her head. Instead, she'd found something entirely unexpected, respect, and perhaps the beginning of understanding. James placed a bowl of stew before her, along with fresh bread. "Eat. Tomorrow, we'll figure out the legal situation. The lawyer says we can still proceed with the marriage visa application, given the circumstances. But tonight, you rest. The guest room is upstairs, second door on the right." "Thank you," Elena whispered. James nodded, returning to his own meal. "Welcome to Callahan Ranch, Elena. It's not much, but it's home." The first weeks were awkward, filled with careful politeness and uncertain boundaries. Elena woke early each morning, determined to prove her worth. She'd grown up on her grandmother's small farm in Jalisco and knew her way around animals and hard work. By the time James came downstairs, she'd already have coffee brewing and breakfast started. At first, he protested. "You don't have to do all this. You're not hired help." "I know," she replied, meeting his eyes steadily. "But I want to. I need to contribute. Feel useful." James studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right. But then you work alongside me, not for me. Partners share the load." That conversation changed everything. James began teaching her about the ranch, the 100 head of cattle, the seasonal rhythms of ranch life, the maintenance of equipment and fences. Elena absorbed everything like a sponge, her quick mind and willing hands making her an apt student. She'd expected him to be a harsh taskmaster, but instead found him patient and thorough in his explanations. "You're a natural," he remarked one afternoon as she successfully treated a calf's infected hoof. Daniel would have been impressed. Elena looked up at him, sweat dampening her hair. "Tell me about him. Please. I want to know who he was." James's expression grew distant, but not closed off. As they worked, he began to share stories. Daniel as a boy, learning to ride before he could properly walk. Daniel in high school, shy but determined. Daniel's dreams of expanding the ranch, making it sustainable for future generations. He was lonely, James admitted quietly. After his mother died, this place felt too big, too empty. He wanted a family of his own, but... He gestured at the endless prairie around them. "Not many young women want this life anymore. Too isolated, too hard." "I don't think it's hard," Elena said softly. "I think it's honest." Something shifted in James's eyes, a warmth that hadn't been there before. In the evenings, they fell into a comfortable routine. Elena would cook dinner, blending her Mexican heritage with available ingredients, creating fusion dishes that made James shake his head in wonder. "Never thought I'd eat beef tacos with homemade tortillas on this ranch, but damn if they aren't the best thing I've tasted in years." She taught him Spanish words, he taught her about Montana weather patterns and wildlife. They'd sit on the porch as the sun set, watching the sky turn impossible shades of orange and purple, talking about everything and nothing. The lawyer called regularly with updates. The immigration case was complex but not impossible. James had hired the best attorney he could find, determined to ensure Elena could stay legally. "Daniel wanted you here," he'd say whenever she protested the expense. "That makes you family. Family protects family." One particularly harsh morning, a spring storm rolled in with unexpected ferocity. They worked together to get the cattle to shelter, the wind howling and rain driving sideways. Elena slipped in the mud, nearly going under a panicked steer's hooves. James pulled her back just in time, his strong arm wrapping around her waist. "Careful," he shouted over the storm. They stood there for a moment, pressed close, both breathing hard. Elena looked up at him and saw not just concern but something deeper, a protectiveness that went beyond duty or obligation. Later, dried off and warming by the fire, James spoke quietly. "I lost my wife, and then my son. This ranch, it's all I have left of them. Their dream." He looked at Elena, his expression vulnerable. "But maybe it can be more than a memorial. Maybe it can still be a living thing, with a future." Elena understood what he wasn't quite saying, that she was becoming part of that future, not as Daniel's ghost bride, but as something real in her own right. "I'd like that," she said simply. James smiled, a rare and genuine expression that transformed his weathered face. "Then we're agreed." "Partners." "Partners," Elena echoed, and felt, for the first time since arriving, that she truly belonged. Not everyone in the small town of Copper Ridge welcomed Elena's presence. Word spread quickly about the mail-order bride who'd come for the dead son and stayed with the father. Gossip flew through the local diner, the feed store, the Sunday church services that James had stopped attending years ago. Elena first felt the hostility during a trip to town for supplies. She'd insisted on accompanying James, wanting to learn the routes and vendors. At Morrison's General Store, conversations died when they entered. Mrs. Patricia Morrison, the owner's wife, looked Elena up and down with barely concealed disdain. "This her, then?" Patricia asked James, not bothering to address Elena directly. "The foreign girl Daniel sent for?" James's jaw tightened. "This is Elena Martinez. She's living at the ranch." "I'm sure she is," Patricia sniffed. "Must be convenient, having live-in help that you don't even have to pay properly." Elena felt her cheeks burn, but before she could respond, James stepped forward. "Watch your mouth, Patricia. Elena is family. You do well to remember that." The older woman's eyes widened at his tone, but she pressed on. "James Callahan, that boy's been dead 2 months. You're telling me there's nothing inappropriate about a young woman living alone with you in that house?" "I'm telling you it's none of your damn business," James said coldly. "Now, are you going to sell us supplies, or do we take our money elsewhere?" The ride home was silent and tense. Elena stared out the window, fighting tears. "Maybe they're right," she finally said. "Maybe this is wrong. Your reputation in town—" "I don't give a damn about their opinions," James interrupted. "These same people who are gossiping. Half of them cheated on their spouses, the other half are in debt up to their eyeballs. They need someone to judge to feel better about their own lives. But still. Elena." He pulled the truck over, turning to face her fully. "Listen to me. You have done nothing wrong. I have done nothing wrong. We're two people trying to honor a good man's memory while building something decent in this world. Anyone who has a problem with that can go to hell." His vehemence surprised her, but also warmed something deep in her chest. She nodded slowly. "Okay. But James, I don't want to damage your life. You've been so kind." He reached out, hesitated, then gently squeezed her shoulder. "You've brought life back to that ranch. Hell, you've brought life back to me. Don't let small-minded people take that away." The next challenge came from an unexpected source, Daniel's uncle, Robert Callahan, who showed up unannounced one Saturday. He was younger than James, dressed in an expensive suit that marked him as a city man despite his cowboy boots. "Jimmy," he greeted, using a nickname Elena had never heard before. His eyes slid to Elena with open calculation. "So this is the situation everyone's talking about." Over coffee, Robert laid out his concerns, barely masking them as care for his brother. "The ranch is struggling financially, James. You know it is. You've got a young woman here with questionable legal status. If immigration comes sniffing around, if there's any accusation of impropriety or fraud, you could lose everything, the land, your freedom, everything." Elena's blood ran cold. She hadn't considered that her presence might actually endanger James. But James's response was measured and firm. "My finances are my business, Rob. Elena's legal case is solid, we've got the best immigration lawyer in the state. And if you're suggesting I'd marry her inappropriately, you can get the hell off my property." Robert held up his hands. "I'm just saying, you're vulnerable. This girl—" "Woman," James corrected sharply. "Elena is a woman, not a girl. And she's more family to me now than you've been in 20 years. The brothers stared at each other, years of unspoken tension crackling between them. Finally, Robert stood. "Fine. It's your funeral, Jimmy. But when this blows up, don't say I didn't warn you." After he left, Elena found James on the porch, staring out at the land he'd spent his life working. "He's right about one thing," James said quietly. "This situation is complicated. But Elena," he turned to her, his expression intense. "I don't regret a single day since you arrived. Not one." Elena moved to stand beside him, their shoulders nearly touching. "Neither do I." The challenges would keep coming, they both knew. But they'd face them together. 6 months after Elena's arrival, the ranch had transformed. The financial struggles James's brother mentioned were real, but Elena's hard work and innovative ideas had begun turning things around. She'd suggested diversifying, adding a small organic vegetable operation, selling produce at the farmer's market, offering agritourism experiences for city families wanting to experience ranch life. James had been skeptical at first. "We're cattle ranchers, not farmers or tour guides." But Elena persisted, doing the research, creating business plans, showing him how other ranches had successfully adapted. Slowly, he came around. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and her ideas were sound. The summer brought their first guests, a family from Seattle wanting an authentic ranch experience. Elena handled them beautifully, teaching the children to collect eggs, showing them how to groom horses, cooking elaborate meals that showcased both Montana beef and her Mexican heritage. The family left glowing reviews online, and bookings began trickling in. James watched Elena bloom with purpose and pride. She'd learned English rapidly, her confidence growing alongside her language skills. She'd made friends with some of the more open-minded townspeople, particularly Sarah Chen, who owned the local bookstore. Sarah didn't care about gossip and had declared Elena the best thing to happen to Copper Ridge in years. One evening in late August, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies, James spoke words that had been building for months. "Elena, I need to say something." She looked at him, curious and slightly apprehensive. Their relationship had remained carefully proper, separate bedrooms, respectful distance, despite the growing warmth between them. "When you first arrived, I kept you here out of obligation to Daniel. A promise to my dead son." James's voice was rough with emotion. "But somewhere along the way, that changed. You're not here because of Daniel anymore. You're here because he paused, struggling with words. "Because I can't imagine this place without you. Because you've become essential, not just to the ranch, but to me." Elena's breath caught. She'd felt it too, this growing connection that went beyond gratitude or partnership. She'd caught herself watching him work, admiring his quiet strength and integrity. She'd noticed how her day felt incomplete if they didn't have their evening talks. "I'm 68 years old," James continued, "and you're 29. I know how that looks. I know people already talk. But Elena, I've fallen in love with you. Not because you remind me of anyone or because of my son's choice. Because of who you are, your courage, your kindness, your spirit." Tears streamed down Elena's face. "James. I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "I know this is complicated. Your immigration case, the age difference, everything. I just needed you to know. You deserve to know how valued you are, how." Elena leaned forward and kissed him, cutting off his words. It was gentle and sweet, full of months of unspoken feelings. When she pulled back, she was smiling through her tears. "I love you too," she whispered. "I have for months. I was afraid to admit it, afraid it was wrong somehow. But James, nothing in my life has ever felt more right than being here with you." He pulled her close, and they sat together as the Montana sky darkened and stars emerged in impossible numbers. The legal resolution came 3 months later. The immigration judge, reviewing their case, the documented relationship, the business partnership, the testimony of community members who'd witnessed their bond, granted Elena permanent residency. The path to citizenship was clear. On a crisp October morning, James and Elena stood before a justice of the peace in Copper Ridge, with Sarah Chen and a handful of true friends as witnesses. It wasn't the marriage Daniel had planned, but it was real and chosen and full of love. As James slipped a simple gold band on Elena's finger, he whispered, "My son chose wisely. He brought you to us." Elena smiled, her heart full. "And his father showed me what true family means. Not blood, not obligation, but choice and love." They kissed as husband and wife, beginning a new chapter neither had expected but both had earned through courage, patience, and the willingness to let love grow in unexpected soil. The Callahan Ranch, once a memorial to the dead, had become a celebration of the living.